You don't repeat the same mistake because you're stupid. You repeat it because the market is designed to let you believe you've learned right before it punishes you again. Most retail traders don't fail because they lack information. They fail after they think they understand what went wrong. That's the dangerous part. Because once you believe the problem is fixed, your guard drops. And that's exactly when the same mistake returns, wearing a slightly different mask. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many times have you told yourself, I know what I did wrong last time, I won't do it again? And yet, months later, you find yourself staring at the same loss, same emotional spiral, same rationalizations, same excuses. This video isn't about discipline, it's not about mindset clichés, and it's definitely not about motivation. It's about the underlying mechanism that causes intelligent, experienced traders to repeat identical errors for years, sometimes decades, without realizing why. Because the truth is this: most traders don't actually learn from their mistakes, they merely survive them. And survival is not the same as adaptation. When people talk about repeating mistakes, they usually point to obvious behaviors: overtrading, moving stops, revenge trading, FOMO entries. All of that is surface level, symptoms, not causes. The real question is deeper. Why does your brain allow the same behavior to happen again, even after pain, losses, and reflection? To answer that, we have to stop talking about trading for a moment and talk about how humans learn under uncertainty. The market is a probabilistic environment. That alone already breaks most natural learning processes. In normal life, cause and effect are relatively stable. You touch fire, you get burned, you learn fast. But in trading, you can do the wrong thing and still make money, and you can do the right thing and still lose. That inconsistency is not a flaw of the market. It's the market's greatest weapon. Because your brain is not wired to learn from probabilities, it's wired to learn from outcomes. So when you break your rules and still make money, your brain doesn't register the behavior as dangerous, it registers it as validated. And when that happens enough times, the mistake stops feeling like a mistake at all. It becomes a pattern you trust. This is where most traders get trapped. They believe they've identified the mistake, but what they've actually identified is only the visible action, not the reinforcement loop behind it. And that's why the mistake keeps coming back. Let's ground this in a real trading context. Imagine a trader who repeatedly holds losers too long. He knows this is wrong. He's read about risk management. He's even written rules for himself. But every few months, the same thing happens. A position goes against him. He delays the stop. He tells himself the market will come back. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Now here's the critical detail most people miss. The times it comes back are far more damaging than the times it doesn't, because those recoveries teach the brain a silent lesson. Your patience saved you. Not you violated your system, not you exposed yourself to unnecessary risk, but see, you were right to wait. From the market's perspective, this is random variance. From your brain's perspective, it's confirmation. And once confirmation enters the picture, the mistake is no longer perceived as a threat. It becomes part of your identity as a trader. This is why repeating mistakes has very little to do with willpower. It has everything to do with how reinforcement works in uncertain environments. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Most traders are not trapped in bad habits. They are trapped in incomplete feedback loops. They only measure outcomes, profit or loss, win or lose. But the market doesn't punish bad behavior consistently. And because of that, your learning process becomes corrupted. You think you're learning. In reality, you're reinforcing randomness. And over time, that randomness hardens into belief. You start saying things like, "This is just my style. I know it's risky, but it works for me. I've seen this setup recover before." Those sentences are not opinions. They are evidence that a mistake has been normalized. And once a mistake is normalized, it no longer triggers fear or caution. It triggers familiarity, comfort, even confidence. That's the real danger.
Before we go any deeper, I want you to pause and reflect honestly. Think about one mistake you've made more than once, not the obvious ones, the one you defend, the one you quietly justify, the one that feels almost reasonable when you do it. That's not an accident. That's where the real problem lives.
The most dangerous trading mistakes are not the ones that hurt immediately. They're the ones that hurt inconsistently. A mistake that fails every time gets eliminated quickly. A mistake that works just often enough becomes permanent. This is why retail traders don't fix their problems. They negotiate with them. Let's look at what actually happens when you repeat a mistake. From the outside, it looks irrational. You know the rule, you broke it before, you paid for it, and yet, under pressure, you do it again. The common explanation is emotional weakness, fear, greed, lack of discipline. That explanation is convenient and wrong. The real issue is that your decision-making system is being trained by selective pain, not consistent consequence. When you move a stop loss and the trade comes back, the market does something subtle but devastating. It rewards the violation, not the process. And once that happens, your brain updates its internal model of reality. It doesn't say, "that was risky," it says, "that was adaptive." And here's where the pain becomes structural. Over time, you stop feeling tension when you approach that mistake. The internal alarm weakens, the hesitation disappears. What used to feel dangerous now feels familiar. And familiarity in trading is often mistaken for edge. This is why traders can journal for years and still repeat the same errors. Journaling captures events. It does not correct reinforcement. You write, "I shouldn't have entered there," but your nervous system remembers sometimes this works. And the nervous system always wins. This is also why traders often swear they've changed right before the next drawdown proves otherwise, because they change the story they tell themselves, not the internal reward structure driving their actions. The pain, then, is not just financial, it's epistemic. You lose trust in your own judgment. You start questioning whether learning is even possible. You feel stuck, not because you lack skill, but because progress seems invisible. And that's where many traders quietly give up. Not by quitting, but by looping. They trade the same setups, they experience the same drawdowns, they promise themselves the same adjustments, and they wait for a different outcome. This isn't failure, it's stagnation disguised as experience. Here is the turning point most traders never reach. You don't repeat mistakes because you forget them. You repeat them because your system has no mechanism to invalidate them. In other words, the market never clearly tells you this behavior is unacceptable. It simply lets probability play out. Professional traders understand this early, not consciously, but structurally. They don't rely on outcomes to teach them. They rely on process-based penalties. This is the key distinction. Retail traders ask, "Did I make money?" Professionals ask, "Did I violate my process?" And those two questions lead to completely different learning curves. Understanding this changes everything, because once you realize that the market will not reliably punish bad behavior, you stop expecting it to be your teacher. You stop outsourcing learning to randomness. Instead, you build artificial consequences. If a trader moves a stop loss, the trade is considered a loss, even if price later recovers. If position sizing rules are broken, size is reduced automatically for the next 10 trades. If execution deviates from plan, trading stops not because of emotion, but because of rule violation. These are not psychological tricks, they are structural safeguards. They create a consistent feedback loop in an environment that otherwise provides none. This is the moment where traders either evolve or stay trapped. Because the revelation is uncomfortable. It means the problem was never discipline, it was design. You designed a trading environment where mistakes could survive, and as long as a mistake can survive, it will reproduce. The moment you understand this, repeating mistakes stops being a mystery. It becomes predictable.
and what is predictable can be engineered out. But only if you're willing to stop trusting outcomes and start enforcing structure.
At the core of repeated mistakes lies a misunderstanding that almost every retail trader shares, regardless of experience. They believe mistakes are behavioral. In reality, mistakes are structural artifacts of how decisions are evaluated. Let's break this down precisely. In trading, every action exists inside a probabilistic distribution. Any single outcome is almost meaningless. But the human brain is not equipped to learn from distributions. It learns from stories, from salient events, from emotionally charged outcomes. That mismatch creates a fatal gap. When you violate a rule and the market rewards you, even once, the brain assigns that action a positive expected value, regardless of whether that expectation is statistically false. The brain is not calculating expectancy, it is updating belief based on emotional intensity. This is why the same mistake can survive hundreds of trades. From a smart money perspective, this is not a flaw, it is an exploitable feature. Large operators understand that retail behavior clusters around reinforced errors, stop placement habits, overconfidence after wins, risk escalation after drawdowns. These patterns exist because retail traders are trained by inconsistent feedback. Let's look at a concrete case. During range-bound market conditions, many retail traders develop the habit of fading breakouts. They've seen false breakouts fail repeatedly. They've profited from shorting highs and buying lows. Over time, this becomes experience. Then, volatility expands. Breakouts start holding. Trend continuation replaces mean reversion. But the retail trader keeps fading. Why? Because their mistake, counter-trend trading without confirmation, was previously reinforced. From their internal model, the mistake worked often enough to be trusted. Smart money sees this immediately. They know exactly where liquidity will sit. They know retail will add to losers. They know stops will be placed predictably. And they know that when the environment shifts, retail will not adapt quickly because their learning mechanism is delayed. This is not about intelligence, it's about feedback lag. Institutions don't wait for outcomes to tell them if something works. They measure deviation at the process level. They invalidate behaviors long before P&L reflects danger. Retail traders do the opposite. They wait for pain, and pain in markets is always late. Here's the most critical insight. A mistake does not become dangerous when it loses money. It becomes dangerous when it stops feeling wrong. That emotional neutrality is the signal professionals watch for. When a trader no longer hesitates before violating a rule, the mistake has been fully integrated into their identity. At that point, losses become inevitable, not because the trader is reckless, but because the system no longer distinguishes between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. From an insider perspective, this is why many experienced retail traders perform worse than beginners. Beginners feel fear when they break rules. Veterans feel confidence, and confidence without structure is lethal. The market doesn't punish ignorance harshly, it punishes misplaced certainty. This is why repeating mistakes accelerates over time. Early on, mistakes are tentative, later they're automatic. And once behavior becomes automatic, conscious correction is nearly impossible without structural intervention. The conclusion here is not motivational, it's mechanical. If your trading process does not explicitly penalize behavioral deviation, the market will eventually reward it just enough to destroy you. And it will feel justified every step of the way. At this point, the problem should be clear. You don't repeat mistakes because you lack awareness. You repeat them because your trading environment allows them to survive. So the solution is not motivation, it's redesign. The first principle is this: separate outcome from behavior. Most traders only audit results. They look at P&L, win rate, drawdown. That information is useful, but it comes too late. By the time the numbers look bad, the behavior is already entrenched. Instead, you need a second layer of evaluation that operates independently of profit. Every trade should be judged twice, once by the market, once by your process. If those two judgments don't match, the process judgment must override the outcome. That means a profitable trade can still be classified as a failure. This single shift eliminates more repeated mistakes than any psychological technique ever could. The second principle is pre-committed consequences. A rule without a consequence is not a rule, it's a suggestion. If you know that moving a stop, increasing size, or entering without confirmation has no immediate cost unless the trade loses, you've already lost the learning battle. Your brain will always gamble on variance. Instead, consequences must be automatic and non-negotiable. If a rule is broken, trading size is reduced. If execution deviates, trading stops for a fixed period. If risk parameters are violated, the next set of trades is constrained. These responses should not be emotional, they should be mechanical. The goal is not punishment, the goal is feedback clarity. The third principle is environmental control. Most traders try to control themselves. Professionals control their environment. If you repeatedly overtrade, remove the ability to execute impulsively. If you range trade, enforce mandatory cooldowns. If you chase moves, restrict execution windows. You don't become disciplined by resisting temptation. You become disciplined by designing systems where temptation is irrelevant. Finally, understand this. Mistakes don't disappear when you recognize them. They disappear when they stop being reinforced. If your process does not actively starve mistakes of validation, the market will eventually feed them again. The deeper lesson here has nothing to do with trading. It's about how humans adapt under uncertainty. In environments with clear feedback, we learn quickly. In environments with random reinforcement, we don't learn, we habituate. Markets belong to the second category. That's why repeating mistakes is not a personal failure. It's a predictable outcome of relying on outcomes to teach behavior. The traders who break this cycle don't do so by becoming emotionally stronger. They do it by becoming structurally stricter. They stop asking whether a trade made money. They start asking whether it deserved to exist. Once you adopt that mindset, mistakes lose their power, not because they never happen, but because they can no longer hide behind lucky outcomes. And when a mistake can't hide, it can't survive. If this analysis forced you to rethink how you evaluate your own trading behavior, then you're already ahead of where you were. If you want more content like this, where trading is treated as a system, not a gamble, subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment answering this question honestly. Which mistake do you keep justifying instead of eliminating? That answer matters more than any indicator ever will.